Greetings, friends. Reformed Stoic here, back with another video. So, this one is entitled Gnosis and the Failure of All Authority. The title's pretty heavy. Hopefully, I'm able to back it up with a good little thought flow here. Like I've always said, my videos are all unscripted. I feel like maybe I've got a little bit of a rhythm and a knack for that. But this one's tough. This one is like I can kind of visualize what I want to say in my head, but it's kind of beyond. This is getting to the beyond. It's like I had my ideology as, studying theology, rad trad compromise Catholic is what I would call it. Like, I kind of see where the rad trad people are coming from and the people who are against the Norvis Ordo Vatican II Mass. And I was like a monarchist and saying, the secret societies overthrew the monarchy, which was bad, just like communism was overthrowing the monarchy, and communism was definitely bad. I had my ideology, and now I feel like I'm kind of transcending it to something beyond. I feel like in terms of managing society and the masses, like a traditional Roman Catholic or Orthodox monarchy is on paper like a good way to run society, and keep people healthy, happy, more or less. Happiness is maybe kind of what we're getting to here, but healthy, organized, in check. In paper, it's a good way to run society. But as you can see, if you've paid attention, I'm allowing my mind to kind of go to other places and examine other things and put more things under the microscope. And I'm kind of just testing my worldview, though I'm pretty confident I'm no longer a Roman Catholic. I still accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, but maybe on some level I'm not entirely confident of what exactly that means. So, let's say the title one more time, because it's a good title, and it's going to help my conscious train of thought flow. Gnosis and the Failure of All Authority. So what is Gnosis? Gnosis is the idea that truth will come from your experience and particularly your knowledge. I wanted to say your inner experience, but that more so than, knowing a proper theology, which is more or less, because I kind of ended up in the Catholic theology, something reasonable, for lack of a better word, like something that's not super obscure, it's like, there's a very, very, very fringe small group of people who understand the correct theology. Like, more or less, I was to a point where I thought that the Roman Catholic Church was the original church built on the rock. Christ gave the keys to Peter, and something fairly mainstream. And it says something about people and how history played out, that ultimately there are reasonable people about, and they have kept a truth alive to where there is plenty of error, there's plenty of incorrect non-truths about, but the truth is more or less widely available, and someone who is reasonable and respectable and searches for it should be able to find it. So the truth is from the proper interpretation of Scripture. And on some level, I still might believe that. But Gnosis is the idea that you will be saved by knowledge. But I don't know if saved is the right term from the way I see it. It's more that knowledge is what will guide you toward your liberation or enlightenment or Gnosis. When you start entertaining alternate views of how reality might work, if you abandon the heaven versus hell model and maybe start considering a more Eastern model of reincarnation versus heaven. Like I've been saying that, the kingdom of heaven could be like nirvana, and the gnashing of teeth and weeping outside of the kingdom of heaven could be like where we are right now. I mean, there's suffering here, right? Buddha said that life is suffering. And then the Gnostics take it to more of an extreme. Buddha is just, life is suffering, and maybe on some level he doesn't elaborate why. But the Gnostics, soul trap people, have a sci-fi-esque doom and gloom type of an explanation of why this life would be suffering, that it was engineered for suffering. And I don't know about all that stuff. This is things that I'm just allowing myself to exit my hug box and kind of see myself as more of a free agent again. And just, I really want to get rid of bias. I think for now, that is the main point of what I'm doing. I haven't exactly embraced a new worldview. I'm in a place where it's like, all right, I'm willing to be convinced again. I'm stepping away from my probably what was becoming a biased worldview, because there's so many different explanations, there's so many different arguments, and I respect people from all kinds of camps. You can't act like these established beliefs like Catholicism, Orthodoxy, various brands of Protestantism, even Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Everybody's got their people. Everybody's got their Jay Dyers and their Trent Horns. They got their people with their fancy degrees, with their big stacks of books and their little podcasts and YouTube channels, making their arguments, winning debates, losing debates, having close debates. There are so many people out there so confident in their worldview. So why are you so certain that yours is the truth? I was a little bit too certain. And I probably even convinced some other people that are here. So on some level, you could accept where I'm at right now as a thought experiment, a continuing to search for the truth, because I want to be sure. So Gnosis is the idea that you will be saved by truth, liberated by truth, knowledge. But I would say that truth and knowledge are in line. So I probably could have said the failure of all authority and Gnosis, but I thought it was a catchier title to say Gnosis and the failure of all authority. So let's go over the failure of all authority first. Part of what is making me not so sure about the beliefs that I had, that's making me semi-confident that I'm looking for something else, is the failure of all authority. I believe this is something that not everyone gets an opportunity to witness. I found, when you find like hotshot wrestlers or athletes, the Olympics are going on right now. You got these world-class gymnasts and people doing quadruple backflips off of mega high dives. And what happens when some Giga Chad or Giga Stacy wins the gold medal? Well, I'd like to thank my mom and dad. They've always been there for me. My teacher, I couldn't have done it without my teacher. Same thing when an MMA fighter wins in UFC. I like it when they say we. It's like, we planned for this and we planned for that. We knew he was going to go for the takedown. We knew that we were going to have to weather the storm, but we persevered and we got the win, baby. He's so tight with his team and so much trust for his team, for his authority, that he accredits it to get the win. So for some people, they have good experiences with authority, and some people have bad experiences with authority, but I'm under the impression right now that more or less the people who have good experiences with authority are more on the naive side of things. It's like you're removed from corruption, so you kind of tell yourself and spread this message that there isn't really that much corruption. Or on the other hand, someone who has varying levels of abusive parents, it could be just gaslighting, narcissism, dark triad, an enabler, mom, narcissist dad, or it could be on the very high end of the spectrum to where you were human trafficked and pimped out as a child by your parents and sexually abused by your parents, and horrible things happen in the world. And I don't want to make assumptions about people. We're speaking in really broad terms here, but I feel like really well-to-do people sometimes are a little bit naive because it doesn't feel good to acknowledge these really dark parts about the world. But it's pretty common practice in apologetics for some troubled woman to approach a priest and say, hey, I was human trafficked by my parents when I was a child. I was sold into sex slavery by my parents. So how do you reconcile that with the Old Testament's honor thy mother and father? You run into those people. And I was into apologetics for a while as well. And I could have potentially been someone that could have potentially happened to me. Somebody could have been in my chat and said, hey, I was abused by my parents. Horrible things happened to me on behalf of my parents. So how do you reconcile that with the Old Testament, honor thy mother and father? Well, here's how I would answer that question now, is that my faith is in the New Testament, particularly the Gospels. That's where I'm at right now. Still skeptical in terms of translations, thinking that I look for consistent information in the Gospels and also in the epistles of the New Testament. I consider that there could be error. I don't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. I don't believe that everybody knows that we have perfect translations and there's nothing to fear. Even if some translations are better than others, the Bible has been protected. I'm not so sure about that, but I still have faith in the New Testament for the most part. But I'm beginning to get this idea that there is conflict between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I'm beginning to believe that I'm looking at two separate systems. The Old Testament says, honor thy mother and father. Jesus said that he came to bring arguing and conflict between mother, father, sister, brother. He said he came to bring infighting between families. Like, he would have a message that would likely set you apart from your own family to where you need to choose Christ or the path of Christ or both over your family. I believe that those messages are in conflict. Now, I would also say that Jesus said that you should forgive someone 70 times 7. But there's levels. Like I always like to say that you forgive someone when they've asked to be forgiven. Because some people don't ask for forgiveness. It's like they're entitled for you to not be angry at their abuse. And then it's very common in like self-help circles, maybe good psychologists and therapists to say that, look, you don't forgive them for them. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you continue to allow the abuse. Forgiveness basically means that you let it go and you move on with your life. Like maybe you forgive your abusive family member, but you don't allow them into your life anymore because they're not willing to change. Now, there's certain circumstances in life where maybe somebody could have an alcoholic mother who you grew up and your mom was an alcoholic and she had abusive boyfriends. Like maybe you got abused by your stepdad as a woman or a man. You were abused in whatever way, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be sexually. Abuse has all kinds of different things, but just painting a specific example, you have an alcoholic mom, she's a single mom in low-income housing. Stepdads are coming in and out and they're abusive and boyfriends, and she was a shitty mom. But it gets to one point where she's very sorry and she's changed and she's put her old ways behind her. That is where you would apply forgiveness. So there's different kinds of forgiveness. There's like, I forgive you and you've changed and you're allowed back in my life. And then there's, I'm going to let this go. I'm not going to hold my resentment and my anger against you. I am going to have a Christ-like forgiveness and unconditional love for you, kind of. But I'm not going to allow abuse to continue. Okay, so that is how I would answer that. More or less saying that I am considering a rejection of the Old Testament. Now, there are people who have pointed out that the Ten Commandments are in other places than the Old Testament. Like, there are other works where you can find the Ten Commandments, at least some of the Ten Commandments. And then Christ reiterated the Ten Commandments. I believe that he consolidated it to 6 of them. He had a shorter version of them. But anyway, getting to the point here. All right, we're 17 minutes in, so we've kind of gone all over the place. The failure of all authority has made me reconsider things. I believe that I have experienced failure personally from my parents. Not to an extreme, but I have witnessed their failure to lead. I have witnessed the failure of my drum instructor, the guy who taught me how to play drums. He got super jealous of me. He went on smear campaigns of me when I was at a very young age. It evolved into something really intense where he was stalking me last time I was in Kodiak because he worked for this environmental agency. I've witnessed the failure of his authority. You know, when somebody teaches you something, they're your teacher, they're an authority. And I've had all these situations in life where I'm very confident that I was correct to reject an authority. My parents are not teaching me properly. My drum teacher is trying to sabotage me and harm me. I have experienced the authority of other teachers being failed. I have experienced the failure of the authority of police. I know other people. I knew a guy in Vegas who said that the police stripped him naked and handcuffed his hands behind his back, threw him in the snow, and threw cold water on him. There's all kinds of examples of the failure of the authority of police. And a big part of what we've covered on this channel is the failure of the authority of the CIA and the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, which I recently figured out was actually founded by a former Stasi member. That's right. Someone, I'm gonna have to fact check this, but one of the people at least responsible for the creation of the Department of Homeland Security was actually a member of the East German Stasi. So, wow. No wonder they're integrating Stasi tactics into their security measures or whatever you want to call it. I believe that I could go on and on. The failure of the authority of politicians, the failure of the authority of intelligence agencies, of police, of parents, of teachers, Throughout history, of course, there's a failure of authority in kings. We've seen the failure of the authority in priests. Okay, I unfortunately want to take low blows when it comes to the authority of the Catholic Church. I kind of went in circles with it, where I started to become this defender of the Catholic Church, and now I was really tempted to play devil's advocate, where it's like, hey, well, what about the kids that were molested by priests? Because that's always kind of been the low-hanging fruit. When I was a Protestant, I've seen a lot of Protestants taking low blows. I got to a point where I thought, okay, when I look at these debates online, the Protestants are swearing. The Protestants are being very vulgar and very disrespectful about these cases of sexual molestation in the church. But it is relevant. When you're talking about apostolic succession, it's like these are people who went through the seminary program and became a priest legitimately, who, according to the catechism and the tradition, they have this apostolic succession, and they have failed. So I believe that is evidence of the non-authority of the Catholic Church. There's so many instances of people going through this due process to obtain this apostolic succession, doing horrible things, to where it's like, well, in spite of the argument of the church founded on the rock and the keys of Peter, we have seen people who have gone through these supposedly holy trials to gain this authority in the church, and they have abused it. In my opinion, proving that it is not this magical, pull the sword out of the stone, God wills it, succession church from Christ. What it looks like to me is that people very quickly came up with that argument and used the legacy of Christ to create a kind of government establishment which had a very powerful narrative behind it that ultimately became the original totalitarian system. There is much blood on the hands of the Catholic Church, the Cathars being a prime example, and other groups of Gnostics. And here I am thinking that maybe on some level, remembering that Gnosticism is very broad and had very many sects, the Valentinians, the Cathars, the Sethians, the Mandeans and Manichaeans. It kind of goes on and on. But I'm starting to believe that maybe on some level, the Gnostics were correct. And what does that mean for the world? How could something obscure be correct? It makes the world feel a lot more warm and just and friendly when something, like I described earlier, somewhat long-windedly, popular and available, like Catholicism, like, you got to wade through Protestantism and some other mainstream things, atheism, but Catholicism is there. You can find it. It's pretty popular. So what is that saying for my worldview? That, wow, I have just, it's dark, like I've gone from embracing something relatively available to maybe siding with something fringe and obscure, that was almost wiped out pretty early, near the life of Christ. Well, the failure of authority, the failure of all authority, not like all, but within all authorities on the earth, you can find failure. And I'm not convinced by the little patchwork arguments. It's like, hey, well, in terms of the apostolic succession of the Catholic Church, why is there a failure in these authorities? Oh, that's the failure of people. That's not the failure of the church. But these people are the authorities of the church, and they are the working arms and legs of the church, and the actions of the church reflect through their authority and through them as people, and they have failed. And there are instances when people who were Catholics, a Catholic child being taught theology young, what they needed to do for their safety, to avoid trauma, to avoid suffering, to avoid injustice, was to reject Catholic authority. Put in a position where you're following your religion by allowing an authority of the church to abuse you. Positions where, a cop is trying to set you up. They're trying to lead you into a trap. I've experienced it. The Alaska State Troopers, one Trooper Beaver in Kodiak, Alaska, he was trying to set me up. The court ordered me to send a copy of the restraining order to this guy I was going to court with. And once he gets this copy of the restraining order, he says, I told him not to email me, or I told him not to mail me. He's not supposed to be mailing me. And he calls up his friends in the troopers, and the troopers call me up, and they're trying to get me to admit that I sent this to him. Because this is some weird loophole where I could have ended up in jail if I would have done what this officer of the law wanted me to do. I was right to object his authority. I was right to object the authority of my teachers and my mentors who were trying to sabotage me. I've even been right to object my own father's authority in times when he was trying to sabotage me. I've had this unique view of the world where I see, if you want to elevate, if you want to do better, if you want to avoid trauma and abuse and sometimes even jail or being institutionalized or having bad things happen to you that pull you down, you have to reject authority, because on some level, all authority has failed. And this is where Gnosis comes back in, because no one teaches you to reject authority. The institutions do not teach you to reject authority. And they'll give you hints of it. Milgram's experiment and the Stanford prison experiment. I learned about that in high school. My junior year of high school, I had a psychology class. And, Milgram's experiment, they administer the shocks. You're probably already familiar with it. Basically, somebody taking a goofy little survey is being shocked. You believe that you are shocking this person, and the person begins to beg for you to stop causing them pain. And you look over at somebody in charge and they say, "It's okay, administer the shock." 80% of people continued to administer the shocks. Only 20% of people rejected the authority that was encouraging them to cause unnecessary suffering. Only 20% of people were able to go with their gut, were able to rightly object to this corrupt authority. And then you have the Stanford prison experiment, where people were assigned the role of prison guards and people were assigned the role of prisoners. But once they got to like the week or 2 week mark, things had devolved into chaos and borderline torture, and these people who were given these authority roles were displaying these archaic, sadistic, demonic, arguably Machiavellian kind of traits. They were beginning to abuse the prisoners and abuse their power. So Stanford prison experiment showed us that people with high authority are inclined to be wicked. And Milgram's experiment showed us that 80% of people are incapable of rejecting a corrupt, malignant authority. Therefore, most people in authority can be assumed to be corrupt, and most people will be incapable of rejecting that corrupt authority. We learned that in high school. But what if your teacher's corrupt? Well, you're in an authority position. Like, should we reject you and go to the office? There's hints of it. It's right there. But people, unfortunately, it seems like there is always the few, the philosophers, the people who escaped from the cave. Heraclitus was a early philosopher who talked about the watchers of the games, the people who were always misled by the politicians, the masses. There are the few who at least get to take the journey toward enlightenment, to leave the cave, and then there are the masses who are always misled by the tyrannical authority. Authority hasn't always been tyrannical in the government, but I certainly think that it is now, and it has been many times in history. And Aristotle pointed out that democracy oftentimes leads to tyranny. So, Gnosis. People who are able to cut through all the fat and begin this inner journey toward truth. Because the corrupt authorities are never going to tell you that you're corrupt. It's something that comes from within. I'm struggling a little bit in defining Gnosis. It's knowledge. It's often described as salvation through knowledge. But there is permission in Gnosticism to stray away from strictly Christian theological traditions. And you hear people say things like, it's not understanding, it's innerstanding. I think that kind of stuff is kind of cringe, but it's a little bit too hung up on words. Knowledge, my friends, an intuition, experience, learning from your experience, learning from direct experience. I hear people say that. I came across those people in the past when I was, fighting for whatever church. I heard it as a Protestant and as a Catholic. People saying, well, I have direct experience of something. And I would be careful, because just because you hear some voice in your head that tells you something, well, it could be a local spirit or a demon, and they could lie to you. But ultimately, in a world of failed authority, you keep reading, you keep studying, you keep using your discernment, logic, and reason to find the best arguments and the best information. But you keep in mind that authorities have failed, and life isn't fair, and life appears to be suffering for many of us. And it's this mystical kind of an intuition that I believe can be developed through meditation, maybe some different kinds of yogic practice, prayer, spiritual devotion. It's the idea that the man who slaves over books and has kind of an arrogant demeanor, thinking that, his master's degree or his PhD and his scholarship is going to lead him to the truth. It's kind of like when you're talking about martial arts, like a bodybuilder versus a martial artist. It's kind of like the athleticism from explosive weightlifting and training is like your scholarship and whatnot, but your martial arts ability, which is ultimately going to win you the fight, is something else. It's a tool. Like, everybody who wants to be a champion and finding the way might as well be like you're a champion. It's to a level of development in the sport where you need the athleticism, you need the training, you need, on some level, to be muscularly developed, and you're probably going to be a big guy for your weight class. But it's not about bodybuilding. It's not about lifting weights. It's not just about athleticism. There's something up here. There's something in here. There's knowledge. They say that at the end of the day, top levels of martial arts is a thinking man's sport. People aren't just getting manhandled physically. They're getting outsmarted. So there's something beyond it all, guys. And I'm starting to say, like, this isn't teaching how the world should be run, in terms of how the world should be run. But let's face it, guys, like, this theocracy, this monarchist theocracy, is there going to be no oppression? You know, is it going to be a utopia? Is it going to be a wonderful, perfect place where nobody gets trampled by a boot? No, absolutely not. I've realized that I want to be free. And not everybody is going to be free. It's never going to be that way. There will always be the masses, and there will always be the few who are getting a front row seat to wisdom, to truth, to Gnosis, to something beyond that not everyone is meant to see. You got your little all-state wrestlers who, I just want to thank my mom and my dad and my teacher, and everybody was so supportive. And oftentimes these guys will be the people who back the blue and, every now and then there's a bad apple, but, the police are great, and, anti-CIA is anti-America. And I wouldn't always draw that correlation, but it's there. I've seen it. You see it in, people like Colby Covington, I just want to thank the first responders, and, worships Trump and super right wing. Some people get a front row seat to something very ugly, but if you can sort through these sands, looking for the gems of wisdom, you, the true seeker who keeps going, you keep learning, you keep seeking. Maybe you think you found the truth for a while, but then maybe eventually it falls apart. For me, it fell apart through my direct experience. I got stalked and harassed at my church by people who were parts of the church. I received bad advice from my priest. I am to a level where I just know better, where I have just seen that I'm in this on my own at this point, because I'm at a high level. I'm at a high level where I've realized that authority can let you down, authority can mislead you, authority can try to harm you and set you up, authority can even try to kill you. There are people in these esteemed, high-level, wonderful positions, thank you so much for your service, who want me dead. And not for good reasons. No due process. Unconstitutional. I have been not treated fairly. I did not receive my constitutional right to a speedy trial, to due process. Because it's a failed authority. Because all authorities are failed authorities. And I'm talking about people still. This isn't about God, or does this mean that God is evil and it's a demiurge? No, we're not going there. We're talking about the planet. But it says something. The failed authority of people says something. People are confident in this system that the few get to understand is flimsy and weak and false, and it will hurt you. And it will hurt you if you're a good person. It will hurt you if you're a smart person. It will hurt you merely for seeing it for what it is. A big crock of shit. I'm sorry that I didn't word it in a more succinct manner, respectful manner, but the reality is dark, my friends, but it's only so dark. Gnosis and the failure of all authority. This is probably an idea that I'm going to continue hashing out in my head. I think that title just came to my mind last night when I was in bed. I could have spent more time thinking about it, but don't be deceived, my friends. And like I said, this isn't a political system for everyone. This isn't a solution to the world's problems, okay? I'm not running for politics. I'm telling you that the world is unfair, that the authorities are corrupt, and if you are a truth seeker, it's going to be a little bit more than getting straight A's and winning the spelling bee, okay? Because the people who are clapping for you and, oh, this is the best student, he listens so well. I was put in timeout, okay? In elementary school, they put me in special ed, but I remember, I have a very good memory. The teacher that put me in special ed, it's because I was annoying. It's because I cracked jokes and the kids liked me. And, you know, sometimes, like, I would have some commentary that made the teacher look bad. I'd say things that would make people laugh and not pay attention, and she abused her authority to cripple my childhood education. I don't remember exactly where I was going with that, but yeah, you know, it's like some of the kids, the point is that some of the kids who the teacher said, oh, he's just so smart, he's so good, he won the spelling bee, he got straight A's, and he's in the extended learning program. By the way, that's what we had in Kodiak, is ELP. I knew about other kids that were in ELP, and some people online are saying that that was a version of the GATE program. So it's almost like maybe in reality I was supposed to be a part of that, but I wasn't because the teacher screwed me over. But I don't know, maybe that protected me from whatever kind of brainwashing those kids went through. And they're like, oh, we should have got him. They screwed up. But the point, guys, that I'm having trouble getting to, we're wrapping up the video, is the teacher's pet, straight A's, skyrocketing through school and honors and getting the degrees and getting everything. I'm not saying that education doesn't have its place, but where do these people end up? What happens when you go to Harvard? Oh my gosh, the best students, they go to Harvard, and then the best students in Harvard join the Skull and Bone Society, and then they go serve the giant boot, and then they go learn how to rule the world after they're done masturbating in coffins and telling each other their deepest, darkest secrets. Like, they get absorbed into the establishment. So, read the books. Study. This is like jazz. I would say this is a lot like jazz, you know? It's like you go to a school like Berkeley or Juilliard, and you gotta learn the chords. You gotta learn the hits. You gotta learn to read the music. And you keep ascending, you keep ascending. You're a real jazz cat, man. You know all, it's like, oh man, I know all the jazz standards, front and back. I'm learning to play jazz standards backwards. I'm rearranging. I'm making my own versions of jazz standards. And I can transcribe the keys. I can play it in any key. It's like, okay, so what's next, guru? Let me see your books. All right, is this all of them? Is this all your books? Throw them in the fireplace. What are you doing? But those are my books. But that's like, you don't need them anymore. You don't need the rules anymore. And then, you know, the other kids who don't make it as far, yeah, they always need the books. They always need the rules. But you know time. But you know melody and harmony and transposition and the circle of fifths and 2/5s. And you know the rules so well that you don't need them anymore. And the people who make the jazz music that is legendary, that really leaves an impact, get to that level. And I think I have a history on my channel of speaking in very rational, clear ways. And the reason I'm not satisfied with this train of thought right now is because it's becoming less like autistically rational and everything makes sense, and it's becoming more of a wisdom gem kind of a parable. It's something that is hard to grasp. I'm having trouble dissecting the metaphor or the allegory or the parable. It's in its finest form. You know, you filter it and you try to like extract the wisdom. I'm afraid, my friends, here, the wisdom can't be abstracted. Not from me right now. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think the jazz example is pretty good. That small handful of students who get to the Pat Metheny level, who get to the Antonio Sanchez level, who get to these high levels, it's like, man, you've learned from the books. You've learned from the exercises. I mean, do you want to write books and exercises, or do you want to play? Do you want to be one of the greats? These are the secrets of the greats. You know the rules. You've mastered the rules. Now it's time to break them. I believe in being a good person, my friends. The last thing I wanted to put in this video is I found some random girl on YouTube. I kind of rage unsubbed her because I didn't like what she was saying. It was called like the date with my non-self or something. She just went on these really long rants about how there's nothing, and she would giggle. And for some reason I was kind of intrigued by it. It's like, there's no you, there's no me, your problems don't matter because it's not happening. And what you did doesn't matter because those people aren't there and you're not there. I was intrigued by the rants that this girl was going on. But then she got to a point where she was like, and you know, the things that you think are sin doesn't matter because you're not really there and you're not really doing it. And those people that you think that you're hurting aren't really there. And I was like, okay, well, that's wicked. That's taking a dark turn. The reality is, my friends, is you might not need to be afraid into being a good person. You very well might be able to be a bad person and get away with it. I choose to be a good person. Even if I think there's maybe some weird way that I can escape the consequences. I think in the long run, you can't. I think maybe it's going to come a little later than Christians think. I think I said this on Patreon, patreon.com/reformstoic. I got great content there, 50-minute, hour-long rants like this, stuff that hasn't been covered here. I think that maybe some of these left-hand path satanic weirdos, maybe they really will become a phantom after death, and maybe they really can extend and keep being pests, you know. But first of all, I don't think it's a glorious thing like maybe they think it's going to be. And I think in the long run, you're going to find yourself in this weird place where 300 years have gone by and you've survived as a phantom who like vampires energy off of people, and you're going to be in this weird place where it's like, I'm completely alone, I'm isolated from everyone, and I've done this to myself. God didn't do it to me. God didn't put me in hell. I chose hell all on my own, and I have no one to blame but myself, and I was arrogant the entire way there. It's almost worse when God doesn't make the decisions for you, my friends. The freedom might feel invigorating, but you might realize that you would have been better off with God just smacking you down. Because when you realize that he won't, someday, way down the line, when you've been laughing and LARPing as a witch or whatever, you might think, wow, I really wish that God would have just taken away this freedom from me. So I was intrigued by her rants about things being an illusion. I think that can help you in certain ways. Like on some level, I do believe in the illusion of Maya, which could be seen as like the soul trap. By the way, jhana yoga is the practice within Vyata Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. There we go. Advaita Vedanta. Jnana yoga is the practice of continuously asking the same question and forcing yourself to answer that question from within. Gaining an answer from within to this one question that you continuously revisit. And if you don't know what that question is, then you aren't ready. That is for the attainment of moksha. And that is very in line with the soul trap. Advaita Vedanta is very in line with the soul trap. The obtainment of moksha through jnana yoga is very in line with Gnosis, soul trap, Gnosis, Gnosticism, jnana yoga, Advaita Vedanta. It's in line with the idea of the illusion of Maya, or all is Brahma and you are the Atman, but ultimately the Atman is also Brahma. I have no conclusions in this video, friends. There's no conclusion. Some of you maybe should just say, oh, you know what? Stoic is a LARPer, idiot. I thought he figured it out and now he's nuts. And I'm just gonna, go to a church. And I think you should go to a church anyway. You might harbor some of these ideas in your head, but that's okay. There's a long history of that. The Meister Eckharts and the Bohms and Joachim of Fiore. And these people were out there, man. And what a lot of people say is they had to be in the church because, if they said they weren't, if they admitted what they really were, maybe they would have been killed. But some of these people even believe that they can reconcile it with the Bible. It's like what I'm saying doesn't contradict Christ or the Bible. And I'm getting to a point where it's like, I'm pretty sure that what I'm becoming about is very much so still rocking with Jesus Christ. But I'm wondering about the Old Testament. But my journey is not done yet, friends. And I feel like this was a little bit of a ramble here. But there's some gems. There's some things to think about. Gnosis and the failure of all authority. Once you see the incompetence of the people running this show, it should make you think, what is this show? What is this show, and why should I listen to these people, and who taught me what I thought I was so certain of? And if so many people are incompetent, then how am I ever going to find the truth? Look within, my friends. Silence of the mind. Be still and know that I am God. Seek and you will find. Those who have ears to hear will hear. I believe that people here will find it. There's not a lot of people here, but it makes perfect sense, man. It makes perfect sense, and I bid you a good evening. Until next time, my friends, God bless.